7:02. Thank you very much. Thankfully, we have glass in front of us today, so it does not transmit human viruses, and computer viruses are safe through Zoom itself for the most part. So in this meeting, we should be okay. Just turned on captioning, so you may see that as well. So welcome, everyone. Thank you for being able to join us. Much appreciated. Attorney Bobrowski, thank you for joining us. We're gonna have some fun this month. It's going to be a busy meeting.
It's going to be illegally too much fun. I can tell you that.
You have a different sense of fun than many of us, but then again, this is a profession you've decided to devote much of your life to, so it's excusable and understandable at the same time.
38 years.
So public engagement, we have a couple of members of the public. Attorney Bobrowski does count. Attorney McGrail, you count. If there's anything you'd like to contribute at this point, you're welcome to. Otherwise, of course, during the meeting itself. Okay, next item on the agenda is reviewing the minutes from May 20th. Thank you, Ann, for taking them. So before we put the minutes onto the floor, a couple of questions on them, and then we can put it. There are just a couple of things, and you may have these in your notes. Do we know who were the four who voted in the affirmative for the minutes of April 16th? I know it was 4-0. Catherine was the abstention. I remember that. I just couldn't remember who wound up. Okay, actually, it would be the other four. Do you know what time Eric wound up joining? Just so that we can. You're on mute. The famous that's the famous COVID line.
Exactly. I wasn't alerted to when he joined, so I'm not exactly sure. I noticed it well after the fact and forgot to include it. So it was a fairly short meeting, though, correct?
Relatively, yeah.
Yeah. Because I couldn't see on my screen that he had come in.
Okay, that makes sense. I'm just thinking from a formatting perspective. I know he joined after the roll call vote for the minutes, and so if we would just move that below that, it may make it a little bit clearer.
Perfect.
So okay, so with that, those were the only things from a technical perspective. And then need to record that the motion adjournment was unanimous by roll call vote for the adjournment itself. So with the three changes, and I will correct the spelling of Catherine's first name. Any other suggestions before we put this on the put a motion forward? Okay, do we have a motion to approve the minutes with the necessary changes for compliance?
So moved.
Second.
Joe makes the motion and seconds. Tim's recording. Okay, any further discussion on the minutes? And short version, Attorney Bobrowski, what we did discuss was a lot of the different pieces that around draft 2, just to set up the way that we should do meetings going forward. And we also had a discussion of the town meeting. So different items. I can send you a copy of those minutes if you'd like.
That would be great. Did you make it? We had talked, Mr. Chairman, about a couple of different models going forward. Did you discuss that with your committee?
We did, and the short version is that we had discuss various pieces, and unless we find that there's an issue with holding meetings as a committee, we'll go forward as a full committee for now. And we are going to have another meeting in late June per your suggestion. And I've
Yeah.
already sent out notifications for that.
That's great. So that'll be a stakeholders meeting or something like that.
Correct.
Okay, that's great. It's good to get some feedback from outside the group.
So, okay. Any other discussion on the minutes? Okay, with seeing none, we'll take a vote to approve the minutes with minor modifications for compliance in the order in which you are on the screen. Tim, you're first.
Yes.
Anne,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes.
Lucy,
Yes.
and I'm affirmative, so that's unanimous vote. Excellent, thank you. And Anne, did you want to make the changes to the minutes? And
Sure. Yes.
and then I will put the footer on and send them off as appropriate.
Absolutely.
Thank you much. These are approved 6-3. Okay, that takes care of that piece. Much appreciated. And I do expect we will have a couple more members joining this evening in a little bit. So for the June meeting forum, the note that I sent out to stakeholders, and it wound up going out to 7 departments and 7 department heads as well. So 7 boards and 7 heads. Joe, you may have gotten a copy of this separately through the other service that you have. I tried to be very specific in the goal of this, and so with full transparency, I just did it as one email with everyone in the 2 line, and use the town email addresses, so that way it would go to people accordingly. And so it went to Zoning Board of Appeals, went to the Board of Health, went to the Planning Board, went to the Conservation Commission, Disability Commission, and then a bunch of different individuals. It went to the planning coordinator, went to the town planner, so economic development, town planner, town administrator, town council, building inspector, chief of police, fire chief, health inspector, the conservation commissioner, and our disabilities coordinator, who also was a town engineer. So those were the initial stakeholders that I included in the notice, and this is what I wrote to them. And a copy of this went also to Attorney Bobrowski and Attorney Mullen. So, dear fellow leaders of our town, the members of the Bylaw Review Committee are looking for input on priorities for the upcoming zoning recodification. The project is underway, and your board's departments have been identified as likely having interest in land usage in our town. We are planning a meeting for Thursday, June 27th, 7 p.m., where we would particularly like input on priorities and items of interest. This meeting will be held in a public forum style, and we encourage active participation. The exact location, logistical details will be sent in another email soon. The zoning recodification process is significant and may affect our community for generations. Our town will be better served with zoning bylaws that meet current needs and have more refined language. We also have the ability to make changes to the zoning as well. The committee has unanimously voted that existing current zoning maps themselves will remain as part of the process. As part of the recodification, definitions are being updated. Newer zoning concepts are also being discussed. Zoning legal expert Mark Bobrowski Esquire will be available to help answer questions about the current draft. Your input and that of your committees, boards, departments is important. Please circulate this email to your committee, boards, departments, and any others that you think may have interest in providing input. While input is always valued and appreciated, it is important to the committee to gather opinions and priorities from many different approaches, and having people hear each other can help our conversation, can help spur conversation. Throughout this entire process, we encourage people to follow along and read the materials posted to the committee webpage. On the left side are links to the various drafts. If there are any questions, please let me know. If accommodations are needed for any meeting, please let us know in advance. And we'll work with town engineer and ADA coordinator William Renell for access. Thank you for your time, assistance, and dedication to our town. Respectfully, me. Welcome, Kevin. At 7:12. Tim, if you want to record that. So that's the email, and welcome, Catherine. Well, that's the email that I wound up sending out to the primary stakeholders. And once the location itself is determined, it will most likely be in the public safety building, but I'm waiting on confirmation of that from the town administrator's office. Once we get confirmation of that, I will also prepare a press release, send that to the newspaper so that we can post it to the various community groups and so forth, just so that at a minimum, we are doing what we can so that people have awareness and know that we're interested in feedback. We can ask people to come. We can't obviously force them. And if they choose not to and choose to give feedback at another time, that's acceptable too. Part of this is to try and take the lessons learned from the last town meeting, that we're being open. We're trying to be very accessible and make it so that if people want to give feedback, they can. That's one of the core lessons that I think we learned from the last town meeting. So that's the reason for the wording and the way that this has been positioned. So again, Thursday, June 27th, 7 p.m. It will be a hybrid meeting. If you need to or prefer to attend by Zoom, if you are not feeling well or have some sort of communicable disease, I'm not looking at anyone in particular, please by all means join us by Zoom. Much appreciated. We do want to make sure that everyone is healthy. Summer colds are not fun. So nor is anything that begins with a CO and might have vid afterwards either. So just stay healthy, and for that meeting, we will hold it on both Zoom and in person as well. So again, there will be some of us at the main table, others in the front row, that just so that the cameras can capture everything. That's the best we can do for right now for that particular area. There's some other things that are in process, but they aren't going to be ready yet for the end of June, provided that it's in that room. If it's in another location, there's one room at Town Hall that can do the hybrid meetings as well. That's where we actually had our first meeting in person. And that's a bit small if there's going to actually be significant stakeholders. So that's why we're looking at the public safety building, which has an auditorium style environment. It can hold somewhere, I believe, around 70 to 80 people in total in that space. So it's where the Board of Health has met before, if you've attended any of their meetings, where they typically hold their meetings. Any questions on the initial logistics? Otherwise, the purpose of this is suggested, and the meeting format was suggested by Attorney Bobrowski, really is to try and gather input and show that we're open to input. Draft 2 is published. It's on the website for the committee. It's in its own section so that it's easy to see. Everything that's older was marked under draft 1. So we're trying to make it as reasonable for people to navigate the various files that we have available. And people can comment on those drafts, but they can also bring in any other issues. And just knowing people in this town, they're likely to do so, and likely to give Attorney Bobrowski a run for his money in terms of things to think about and things to consider. But I've got full confidence, Attorney Bobrowski, that you will be able to handle the various requests with appropriate grace and understanding, because you've been doing this a long time.
The older I get, the more, whatever. We'll keep it together. I look forward to it. I'm gonna be there live. So, you know, yeah. I'm
great.
looking forward to it.
We won't use the word cantankerous very much.
At my age, it's part of the deal.
So any questions, thoughts? Again, Thursday, June 27th. Please plan on being available. Because
I'll
our further,
probably make up a two-sided sheet with major minor changes, just to focus the discussion.
okay.
You know, you would have
Anything,
things, you'd have things like the performance standards as a major change, the rewrite of section 5 on nonconformities as a major change. Those, you know, jump out, but at least it moves us along from one section to the next.
you're the one that has experience in doing these things, so whatever you think will work best, I've got confidence that what you're suggesting certainly seems to make sense. Others thoughts, opinions, input?
Just FYI, what I usually do is after you've introduced the procedural history of the committee's work and thanked everybody for coming, I usually take the mic and go through it section by section. So section 1, here are the changes, major, minor. Any questions? Let's talk. If I see none, we're moving on to section 2 and just move our way sequentially through the bylaw that way. I would appreciate your opinions on whether we should use the coded version or the clean version. I can tell you right now, by the time we get to town meeting, I'm adamant that we use the clean version, not the coded version. You got too many latecomers, too much color. It's an invitation to distraction. But for this first stakeholders meeting, I think we should talk about it as a group and make a decision.
Thoughts, input?
I think the clean version is easier to follow, and we have the coded version listed. We have it on the website if people want to access that. But I agree with you, Mark. I think the red lines, the highlights are just too difficult to follow.
To be honest with you, I started creating coded versions about 15 years ago because I got tired of explaining to people what the changes were. And if I had a coded version, I could just hand it to them and onward. And there's always someone who wants to know every change.
I think making it available, which is what Anna's suggesting, and I think even all the way through town meeting, making it available in the town meeting preparation information makes sense for people. And then what we actually present and at town meeting itself and what we have as the primary version would be the clean version.
Good.
That's my recommendation as well. And it looks like Eric is going to be joining us at 7:19. So we actually have a full committee here, which is excellent. Others' thoughts on clean version versus coded version?
I agree. Clean makes sense and is a more effective way to drive the conversation quickly with distraction.
Less is more, right? Isn't that what they say? Less is more.
Yeah, I think clean version too. The coded version I think is more likely to confuse people.
Anyone else have thoughts or input on this? Attorney McGrail, any thoughts on this as a person who definitely has interest in this?
I agree with everything that's been said. I think it makes a lot of sense.
Thank you. I'm in agreement as well. I think that what we present is the clean version and have a reference copy available of the coded version. So if people ask, oh, what's changed here? As you present it, you can have obviously whatever versions you wish because you're the author of it. And most of the questions, the intent is to direct them towards you because it's really a feedback gathering session. And then we will convene afterwards at it to figure out, okay, what components are worth more discussion and so forth, which items should be included and in what way. So this is really a feedback input session as opposed to a decision section. And welcome, Eric. It looks like you have audio and video now working.
Thank you. I don't know how I got here.
I'm going to speculate you up.
Random scratching and clawing. Thank you. Oh, let me adjust my picture. Oh, there I am. I'm
There
in
you
the
are.
library. One of those circles above my head, one of them is me.
So it works.
Yeah.
So
thank you.
glad to have you joining us.
Yeah.
So what we were talking about is June 27th at 7 p.m. is when we're going to have a forum style meeting, and we're going to invite stakeholders to join. Obviously, stakeholders can and we hope will continue to provide input throughout the process. But the idea here is really to gather as many stakeholders together so that they can hear each other as well. Because there is definitely value in hearing things from each other. That's what the beauty of large gatherings of input, even things like town meeting. When you hear other people's opinions, it can help. It can help you refine what the priorities are.
So I want, if we're good on the 27th, I'm not going to make changes to the draft after the workshop meeting because I want to hear from you about what you thought we should change based on the public feedback. And then I'll put a third draft together very quickly after that.
That makes sense.
So I thought maybe a useful thing to do tonight would be to issue spot. If I put the bylaw up and go through it section by section, I can tell you what I've come to as a conclusion for things we probably need to talk a little bit more about. And I can type up the list of things after our meeting tonight, and I can circulate that back to you. Once the workshop meeting is out of the way, we can take the 20 or so issues that I targeted tonight, and we can work by focusing on them and getting it right. And then we'll come back with a combined, well, first we'll do a third draft based on the workshop, and then a fourth draft based upon the issues and their resolution. If you share screen with me, I'll put the draft up.
Okay, I'm going to make you a co-host. And then you can share screens.
Okay, so I don't see anything in section 1 that jumps out as an issue, major or minor. I just won a case. Was it yesterday? Yeah, it was yesterday. No, it was Friday. In the appeals court, my opponent in Watertown was opposing my client's 85,000 square foot R&D facility. And he argued that in the purpose clause, it stated that the protection of property values was a purpose of the zoning bylaw. It was right there. And he's trying to sneak around the rule of the Supreme Judicial Court that diminution in property value standing alone is not a protected interest. And the appeals court is kind of boxed in because in the lead case from the Cape, their bylaw also said protection of property interests in the purpose clause, but the court ruled that it was not a locally or defined or protected interest. And there was some really good language that the appeals court used to finesse their way out of the box. They said this purpose stuff doesn't really do anything more than, indicate what zoning. It's not the creation of private interests. This is not something which gives people rights. It just explains the basis on which zoning was created. So I kind of invite you to go back through this one more time. I mean, to the extent that things like one of the key things you always think about here is view or privacy. Does the purpose clause create an interest that gives standing in view or privacy? So protect natural resource, prevent pollution of the environment. That's coming kind of close. I'm really coming rapidly to the opinion that less is more here. The less, the more you just say that it's protect the first paragraph, promote and protect public health, safety, convenience, and general welfare. You just get into trouble after that. So, because people are always fishing around in these bullets to see whether or not they can claim standing based on some protected interest that you've created. And they always look to the purpose clause, even though the appeals court ruled that it's not the source of defined interests. So just a thought. I don't think it's a particularly important thing to focus on, but it's about all I can find in section 1 that really lends itself to revisiting.
Mark, can I ask a question?
Sure.
On that point, and I do agree with you that less is more, and where we have folks on different side of the growth issue in this town, how we should have growth. Is it too subjective? Is that first bullet point too subjective to plan for the orderly growth of the town?
Well, it's vague enough so that it could be support and fodder for both those opposed to MBTA and for MBTA.
Right. That's my point. So because of that, is that something that would not be helpful to us down the road?
Everything down below fits into the first paragraph. If you just think of the first paragraph terminology broadly instead of narrowly.
Right.
So that's kind of why I'm doing Norton and what's my other town? Holden near Worcester right now. And I'm culling it back. But you're talking to somebody who's had 20 cases in the last 2 years where people have sued my clients who have gotten permits and they're all trying to claim standing.
Right.
So it's like a free for all. And the most common thing you see is the diminution in property value argument, but that's been pretty much put to bed.
Okay.
Privacy would be next. There's no right to privacy inherent in zoning based on the statute. So there's a couple of ways, that we can tackle these issues. The committee of the whole is, obviously we get everybody's thoughts, but we could have a subcommittee for sections 1 and 2. And that subcommittee could report back to the whole committee and say, we looked at section 1.2 and we recommend chipping away at that a little bit. I think the other thing that I would call to your attention in section 2 would be the assisted living overlay district, which I've more or less taken out for now. I'm just running down to the overlays. You can see what I've deleted there. There is an existing assisted living bylaw that creates an assisted living overlay district, but we've gone to a model that talks about senior housing facilities, of which assisted living is an example. And obviously you've got somebody who created an assisted living facility under this old bylaw. I don't think it makes a lot of difference to them because they're just going to be non-conforming under the new bylaw, and they would need a special permit, just like they would need a special permit today if they use the old bylaw to modify what they were doing. And I know you've just created the self-storage overlay district and MBTA, not yet, or maybe never, we'll see.
Go
ahead.
Just a quick comment. In this draft, you talked about doing senior housing, so is senior housing just a by right town-wide, or would that be an overlay?
It's in the use table.
Okay,
So
so
it's a
general.
thing, it's a thing, not a district.
Okay, and so before we move on, because the assisted living facility overlay district was associated with a project that divided the town heavily.
Yep.
I'm being very polite about it. And Attorney McGrail happened to be the working for as his client that was the proponent for. And so curious, Attorney McGrail, your thoughts on this, because I know that questions are going to come to you on would this significantly impact your client, and what are your thoughts about changing the model?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I defer to Mark on that. I mean, Mark doesn't think it will have an impact on the existing use. I respect his opinion on that and his expertise. The only thing I will say is, I think the senior living facility it might be beneficial to incorporate some of the density standards that were part of the assisted living, such as units per square footage of land, because I didn't see anything in there, Mark, currently on that, so I don't know how that will work. What it would be
It's a
based
special
on.
permit, Brian, so I've seen it with a density calculation, but I don't think the density calculation really serves any function. I mean, there's different models of assisted living. I've done, for example, in Andover, I just defended Capital Senior Housing on a 7.5 acre parcel with just under 100 beds. But I also represent Essex Living Group, which does shoehorn assisted living facilities in Worcester, Milford, Tewksbury, Dartmouth. So we're not talking 7.5 acres. We're talking, it's hard to get the van around to the back door. That's a small parcel. They both work, and I don't see that the density calculation is anything other than an attempt to console people into having some predictability.
So the way you have it is, it virtually, it could be anything as long as you get the special permit. It's not.
It's by special permit, but you better show us that it works.
Yeah, that's fine. And then the other part of it too was the parking. I didn't see anything in the parking table for senior living, which would usually be different than multifamily.
There might be something actually in the bylaw. Let me just zip ahead here and look.
Maybe I missed it.
No, it'd be good to know that if I missed it, it's got to go in.
And I'm glad we're able to have this discussion now, because that project was very divisive in its approval components. In the end, the facility is operating, and it's a very good, I think it's safe to say it's a very good partner to the town, and it's certainly a nice facility. But there are people who have a lot of mixed feelings on the whole concept because of the other pieces that were associated with it.
Well, I don't see it in the actual language of this section. I'm now going to look at the parking to see if it's in there somewhere. Well, that would be the closest thing right there. Convalescent nursing or convalescent homes, 1 space per 2 employees. I should probably add senior housing facilities, because they all park about the same.
Yeah, I think what we had in the old bylaw, and not that that's a driving force, but I can tell you what that was. That parking requirement was was 1 parking space per every 2 units, plus 1 parking space per 2 employees in the maximum working shift.
Okay, I'll look that up.
Yeah,
Brian, thank you.
and I'm not saying that's right, Mark, but just to give you a reference.
Well, remember, this is the age where you hide your parents' keys.
Yeah.
And the car disappears mysteriously one night.
And then there was, with this, guys, just to refresh the board's memory, there was, and Dan and Ian, you might remember this, we had an odd requirement because it was the select board at the time, this Board of Selectmen at the time, and I think it came through in the definitions section, had a requirement, let me see. It might have been under the definition of assisted living facility. Yeah, it had this requirement. So it defined assisted living facility and said an assisted living facility may include independent living units as defined by the Wakefield zoning bylaw, which we defined. However, the number of independent living units shall not exceed 50% of the total number of units in the facility.
Oh.
And that was the reason that was put in there was that they thought that if there were too many independent living units, it could be too much of a burden on parking and traffic, because those people would be potentially having their own cars, et cetera.
Yeah, they're more mobile, that's for sure.
So I just wanted to highlight that, Mr. Chair, for you and Mark and the board, just to, these are the considerations that happened at that time that I would want them vetted by you guys, so, and to know about it, so you're not blindsided at a town meeting on something like this.
Mark,
Yeah.
have you seen anything like that where there's a limitation on the type of unit anywhere else?
Where there's a limitation on the type of unit?
That with that type of ratio?
Well, it's the senior housing facility can also be congregate care, which would be some combination of independent, assisted, memory, and long-term. So it's just a matter of working that out in the context of the special permit application. Never forget for a minute that anybody in independent is just visiting, and they'll be in assisted living in a very short period of time.
If I may add, Mr. Chair,
Short is all relative in this context. They will be there almost certainly at some point.
Yeah.
Yeah, if I could add just something, Mr. Chair, I think the direction Mark's going with this is good. I think I'm just bringing this stuff to your attention, so you know the history of it, because you asked. But I think a lot of the history on this and some of the conditions was driven by the location and kind of, as you mentioned, it was just a contentious process. So I think a lot of these things that were put in at that time were more geared towards that project and probably might not be practical in today's world.
I tend to agree. I think that especially as a use that's townwide, a facility that either is being built or rebuilt, because there are some other facilities in town, to have the ZBA be the authority that handles that type of planning, I think makes a lot of sense. And that way, a permit is not guaranteed through the ZBA, and we may want to put something that makes that particularly clear, so that the ZBA has an interactive process, and they have the ability to grant relief, but really only if it makes sense for the town. And it doesn't necessarily mean all of the homeowners, it means for the town overall. And so that's where I'm in favor of having more discretion, so that things can be built, especially going forward, as the needs continue to evolve, because different parts of the town have it. And I think having a wider piece with fewer overlays is a benefit to the town and for consistency. So that's my 2 cents on it. Others who have opinions?
I think I read within the last week or two that the people turning 65 this year are the largest cohort to turn 65 in the baby boom generation.
I don't think we have anyone on who's a member of this committee that quite qualifies to yet. I think we're on both sides of that.
We have
Well,
some very close.
The largest group by year in the baby boom as a percentage of the then living population is 1952, but that doesn't make them the largest group in sheer numbers to turn 65.
So I think focusing on this piece will be important for the planners as well as, dare I say, the press, whom I also expect to be at the meeting. Just so that, again, the idea being that if people want to give additional opinions, they're welcome to do so and encouraged to do so. We want to make sure that there's nothing here that looks like it's being done without getting really vetted. And I'm fully confident in this group that we're doing a lot of vetting. I just want to make sure that everyone here has the opportunity to really make sure that they are heard and any thoughts they have are also presented. Because this would be the only thing that would be so far potentially affecting a map, and it's not actually changing a map, it's just making a map irrelevant.
And attached dwelling overlay, you don't have that anywhere, right?
No.
No.
Okay, so that goes away. The self-storage overlay passed, right?
It did.
We're off to the AG's office. When the AG sends back a letter approving it, I'll add it. And the MBTA, same deal, right? That this did not pass.
That did not pass. That is in back to the town planning board to come up with a different version, I think is a polite way of putting it.
Okay. So then section 2 doesn't have that many changes in it either. So
Mark, can I just point one other thing out that might be helpful?
sure.
This has always been a mystery to me. We don't, if you go back up to the district list, right there, multiple residents, MR1 and MR2. We don't have those on our zoning map.
No, I had I looked in the use table that I was using, and it looked like I was instructing myself to eliminate hang on.
I think as a town, we've been
Yeah,
trying
the
to get rid of those
MR district, delete. I've got a notation that says delete. Should I take that column out?
They're on it's on the table, Mark, of uses, but interestingly, neither of those districts is on our zoning map. And they never have been. They never have been. It's like, even to the prior building inspector, it was like a mystery of why it was listed in our bylaw. I mean, supposedly somebody could create that district on the map, but currently it's not on the map. So again, I defer to you. I just wanted to point that out. If it should be deleted or just leave it.
And MR is multifamily residential?
Multiple residents, yeah.
Yeah. And
Given that we have a multitude of multiple residences throughout the town, I think having it listed would be just adds the confusion. And so anything we can do to make the zoning simpler and less is actually much more for the town. If someone in the future felt that there was a need for it and wanted to add it, they always could come back and amend the zoning bylaw to add it in the future. But I think that if we have the ability as part of cleanup to get rid of items, that's definitely in our best interest to do so. Others' thoughts?
I agree.
Yeah, I would take it up.
I agree.
all right, so I'm going to take that
General
row out of the
residence
column.
does it. Yeah.
And I think you would probably get rid of it on the appendix B table of uses too.
Yeah, in use and dimension.
Is it on the dimensional table?
Let me look, I got it right here.
Yep, it is,
Yep.
Mark. But it's
Yep.
blank. It's interesting. Oh, no, it's on there. It's on there. MR1, MR2. Yep.
Yeah. Oh,
I,
no,
I think
yeah,
that
it's down
simplifying
below.
those tables will be greatly appreciated because they're complex enough to look at.
I think years ago they were contemplating doing a multiple residence district for like apartments, but it never made it on the map. Does that make sense, Mark? Does that happen sometimes?
If you believe the appeals court, it does. I had a big fight with them about 6 months ago. I've never seen it happen. I've never seen anybody go through the trouble of writing the text of a bylaw and then going home, not putting it on the map.
Welcome to Wakefield.
Well, apparently, welcome to Lakeville as well. That's what the court ruled in the case I had there.
We've done a lot of things for the sake of the words. Go ahead, Eric.
I witnessed the planning board in 1969 faced with, they wanted to build 12 stories of apartments in Pleasure Island, and they had no apartment bylaw.
I think that's where this might have come in, Eric.
What?
I think that's where this might have been. I bet you that's exactly where this kind of came from. They were contemplating doing, they never put it on the map.
Yeah, they just built one and the people had financial troubles and so on.
Yes, they did.
All right, well, I'm going to take it out. See, we'll just flag it and see what the stakeholders think.
For what it's worth, I did live on the top floor of that one building in town.
You have to recuse yourself then.
Mark, one other thing in this section, Mr. Chair, do you mind if I point something
Sure.
else up? Just for clarity, it's on 2.5.1. And it's not a change you made, it's just, I think it's a little bit further down, 2.5.
Yeah.
This split lots, where it says, where a district boundary line divides a lot in single ownership at the time of the adoption of said line. It's just odd language. And I'm just wondering if the committee would consider you just, basically just take out at the time of the adoption of such line. I mean, it's hard to even figure out what that means. I've always struggled with that, Mark.
Divides a lot in single ownership. So the lot would have to be in single ownership at the time the line was drawn.
But what's that? What's single ownership mean? I mean, it couldn't be owned by more than one person. It's just odd language.
Yeah, what's dual ownership? Yeah, I think you're right.
Just for your consideration, just to clean it up.
I leave that to Attorney Bobrowski's guidance on that.
Okay. Okay. All right, so section 3, the majority of the changes here are going to be in the use table, obviously. I'll put the use table up in a minute. Much of this is black, so it's what you have.
So if you can scroll up for a moment.
Yeah.
We don't have it above 3.3 into 3.2. The table of use regulations, you have SB, we don't have a select board.
Oh, that's right. You have a TC.
Correct.
But our town council doesn't have any special permit under our bylaw, Mark.
Well, they might want it someday.
Okay, yep.
Okay, that's a good catch.
And if you can change the terminology for the select board to town council as well.
Yeah.
Prior iteration of this committee actually did a change to correct all of that. for the few pieces that weren't properly changed when the name change actually occurred.
So I just want to indicate that principal uses are not the same as accessory uses. So you've got except as otherwise provided, no building structure shall be used except as permitted in the table, whether by right or by special permit. That's the basic zoning approach. Uses that are not mentioned are not allowed. It doesn't work the other way. But when you get down to accessory uses, the court takes a much more liberal approach because, as Judge Foster said in a case where he announced this rule and was upheld on appeal, the accessory uses are just all over the place. Sometimes you don't, even you're inventing them sometimes as you go along. So if you look at this, it's different. Accessory uses are allowed as set forth in the table. In addition, they're allowed in all districts provided they meet the definition of accessory use, which is incidental and subordinate to the principal use and located on the same lot. In the case involved where he announced this rule, it was a million square feet of marijuana grow. I think 860,000 square feet of the building was grow, and the other 140 was manufacturing and processing. And the town argued that neither of those was allowed as an accessory use to a grow facility. And the court said, well, if you were growing tomatoes, you could probably can them. And that's pretty much the same thing. And there's been another case out of the appeals court that's adopted the same principle. So there's just a slight change in the law that we're picking up here in these two sections. I would say that a major change is probably the home occupation provision that I walked you through before. So remember, this is the one where if it's as of right, it's because there's no non-resident employees, customers, pupils, or customers coming to the site. And if there is any of that, it's allowed by special permit. So there can be up to, I think it's a couple of non-resident employees, yep. And you can also have customers, clients, and pupils come to the property. And, since 65% of all people work out of their home, it's a section of the bylaw that gets a lot of attention.
I believe there are certain home occupations that are currently permitted.
Yeah.
And so just want to make sure that what comes to mind, my wife is as an example, she's a music teacher where she teaches typically individual lessons. And so that's something that she has the ability to do by right. And most people who are in her profession and other types of light tutoring also will do it out of their homes, but they won't, they'll have a limit of 2 students or something like that is what I believe the current bylaw allows.
Well, let me look at the use table to just see what the list is in the bylaw.
So I'm looking at the current bylaw, and it's 190.18. the allowed by right include dressmaking, teaching of not more than 2 students simultaneously, offices of medical doctors, dentists, attorneys, architects, or certified public accountants.
All of those things have people coming to the home.
Correct. But
So-
those right now are allowed by right.
So I guess the question for the stakeholders is going to be, do we want to put some of those things at least on special permit because of their impacts on the neighborhood? If you got a neighbor with 5 cars coming and parking on the street or over parking the lot, it creates somewhat of a potential burden on the neighbors, especially the immediate neighbors.
And what I'm wondering is if we want to put that type of limitation into the bylaw so that there's a point at which a going for a special permit makes sense, but incidental componentry doesn't. Just because that's type of thing that, again, politically, I could see giving us a hard time where people say, well, I have the ability to do it.
So is there ever a situation where a home occupation requires a special permit?
If it's not one of the, if it's anything outside of the ones by right.
Yeah, I'm looking at this. This is the strikeout of the old bylaw here.
Right. Other home occupations that are quiet and non-commercial may be allowed by special permit.
Yeah. I don't know. Do you think we're going to get in trouble unless I restore this?
I don't know that we necessarily need to restore all of it other than to have that differentiation is what I don't think we necessarily need to put all of the other limitations for what's allowed. I think we can probably allow more latitude to the zoning board of appeals for what's permitted because things have continued to evolve. But I think of what we can keep this a little bit cleaner by having, home occupations allowed by right, include those, include, a specific list, and it could even be any other quiet non-commercial in nature that does not have, more than 2 people coming to the property at any, more than 2 persons or students coming to the property at any one time. So something along those lines, because we're now seeing new types of home occupations.
Definitely.
And it would serve the purpose of the bylaw while allowing for allowing for people to have people come over and do things as needed without needing a special permit unless they're doing something significant. If they're doing something significant, they can request a special permit.
Yeah, I don't, you know your town. Does a doctor who's working out of his or her house generate a lot of on-street parking in a way that bothers the other people in the neighborhood?
I am curious for other people if you've heard of any issues with any of the professions that are currently listed that have where it's caused distress. I haven't heard of any material distress. I've heard of, specific incidences from time to time where people will get upset because there's some event or something like that, but those are really one-off types of incidences. And similarly to like a yard sale or other equivalent where people, will have an incident and there's a parking issue. But I haven't heard where it's a problem in significance. And there are quite a few people who do use this bylaw now more so than ever before.
So I think we should put it in as an issue, and we should ask the stakeholders whether or not they want to go back to this. In the draft that we're going to circulate, I will strike this out so that it doesn't prejudice anybody. And we'll ask whether or not they want to restore this old section or look at the new section. The new section I got many years ago from Chelmsford, which is bigger than you. Chelmsford's up about 35,000 people now. And the building commissioner was having trouble deciding whether or not something really should get a special permit or not. So we made it a bright line. He was happy to have it that if you had an employee who didn't live there, you needed a special permit. If you were bringing a customer in or a pupil or a client, you needed a special permit. It's not to say that a lawyer handing a will out the front door to somebody who drops by to pick it up needs a special permit. But as a regular practice, if your clients are parking on the street and coming into the house, then you need a special permit. And the thinking was, it changes the character of the neighborhood. Especially if there's a lot more cars, people are now going to have to keep the kids in the yard rather than playing in the cul-de-sac. So not a no, it's just, let's take a closer look at it and maybe put a condition or two in place. Maybe an additional parking spot on the property, or some sort of rules about how many customers can come at the same time. I mean, we've all gone to the doctor and been 8th on the list, so. So I think that'll be a good thing to flag this section and see what folks want to do. I'll bet that they restore the old bylaw, which is fine.
Others have thoughts, opinions as we move on? Eric?
Well, it's closely related to it. People who are plumbers and electricians and so on, they have a car in their own yard and they go off to where they work. And I remember a case of David's Famous, whatever, which was a food truck, serving lunches. And the neighbors complained because it was parked in the yard when, of course, it was off hours, like at night and in the morning before you go to work. They thought it blocked their view and so on. And pointed out that the law prevented that. And the people who lived there said, okay, but you got to enforce that law all over town. So they didn't.
Well, these are your existing rules for overnight parking, 3.5.2.
Okay, I just wanted to raise this.
Yeah, I mean, it's an important issue. I did Quincy a few years ago, and I think they banned out anything over was either 12,000 or 15,000 GVW from coming home.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right, just issue spotting in section 4. I didn't change the table for dimensional regulations. I did kind of regroup these rules, divided them up a little bit. They just sort of were all jumbled together. I assume that this is a fixture in Wakefield, this what is it? This whole thing with the formula there. Is that used by the commissioner every time he tries to figure out whether the lot is legal?
It's terrible. Yeah, it's only in Wakefield, and it was put in, and it makes that section of bylaw makes no sense anymore, because what happens is, Mark, it was designed back in like the late 1990s or 2000, whenever it went in, to try to prevent subdivisions, to reduce the number of lots and subdivisions, which we virtually don't have anymore in Wakefield. Yeah. And what the problem with it is it really doesn't work, Mark, because what people found out is you can make a lot comply by just cutting off a piece of a lot and marking it not buildable on an A&R plan. So there's a huge workaround on that. And, so it's funny you flagged it, because it's always just a pain in the neck and doesn't do anything. So
I'm going to show you a picture from my bylaw. Hang on. So instead of all that math, the Concord bylaw has this. And it is essentially a series of drawings that create regular shaped lots. This is, so you basically have to hold your frontage to the front wall of the house. And you can't gerrymander here in the front by squeezing this. And then in the back, where these rat tails are created in order to pick up area, if the triangle is close to a right triangle, then that area counts. But the black area cannot be used here because this is too narrow a point, if you will. And it eliminates all the math. There's also a provision in here for lot width. So the rule here for lot width is 80% of the frontage, has to be at the front of the house. So if it's 100 feet, it's got to be 80 feet at the house.
Yeah, our bylaw is similar to that. I think we require 75 at the house.
Yeah.
The lot width definition, but
so if you want to look at these, I've always found them to be pretty useful, and they do seem to do the same job as what you've got, which is minimize the number of oddly shaped lots. If somebody wants to take a look at this and make a recommendation, that's fine. But when I look at do I want to raise this irregular lot shape thing as an issue?
really it's a non-issue anymore because we really don't have subdivisions. So, I don't know. It's up to the commission. I don't know if you want to go down that rabbit hole because this becomes a real geometrical discussion.
Yeah.
So without trying to go into circles, keeping on the geometric pathway, I'm thinking that it might make sense to remove the formulaic componentry here for something that is ineffective, and either leave the other portions of the irregularity, the corrections that Attorney McGrail was talking about. And it may just be as simple as saying no residential lot shall be substantially irregular in shape, and then trying to define that, just stating the components of what the requirements are, so that way, if there's going to be something that is an exception, it would have to go at a minimum before the ZBA. We can certainly get into other graphics if you think that helps, and I'm not opposed to having any members take a look at that, because I think that anything that makes the issues clearer is helpful for all parties. It sets the expectations very clearly. But I agree that having a formula in here that is inefficient and ineffective doesn't make sense to leave it.
All right.
That's my 2 cents on it. Opinions of others?
I think introducing something like Concord has would implode people's minds, and
I do
we
too.
might go down the rabbit hole of 12 hours of discussion on that, even if it's a great idea. I'm concerned with.
I can bring that and circulate it when we have the discussion. So
I think people will they're not going to know what to do with that, though. And Brian, if you think it's just not it hasn't been.
This works. It's just it is a formula. It works. It definitely works. But I think I think any lot shape requirement has workarounds, because you can just make non-buildable lots to make your lot conform to shape.
Yeah.
And mark them as such on an A&R plan, and that doesn't promote good development because then you have pieces of land that are just scattered and don't have any use, but because they don't go with a lot. So, this was something that was put in. I remember who did it and why it was done. It was when there were a lot of subdivisions going on in Wakefield, and it was at a different time when people didn't want housing. And, instead of having a 10-lot subdivision, they wanted an 8-lot subdivision. So they wanted to make it harder to work geometrically, to make it work. And it's really not applicable anymore in our town because, we just don't have subdivisions anymore because there's no more land left to do it. But so I would just say leave it, because I think you're gonna go down a rabbit hole that you're not gonna want to go down to a town meeting. And I didn't mean to create that situation.
I don't like rabbit holes, so done.
Ian's right. There'll be a discussion. Will go on for days.
Yeah.
I'm in agreement with that, which is why I was thinking if we just get rid of the formula that's ineffective, leave the rest of leave the other language, that may be a simple way of cleaning up something that doesn't work, but keeps the intent of irregular lots. So if you think that we're better off just leaving it as is, then we can do that too.
All right, here's something that's caught my eye. This FAR reduction for bank. What was the guy who wrote the zoning a banker?
That be me.
The Board of Appeals may allow reductions to FAR and a bunch of other things for bank. Why can't any building have a special permit to do that? Why just banks? Because
The history on that, if I may, Mr. Chair.
Go for it.
That was done as part of the Savings Bank big expansion downtown. That they had a rezone and they knew they were going to need dimension relief, and they didn't want to have to do a variance mark, so it was really tailored toward a project. That was a very popular project.
Special permit, only the popular projects get the special permit.
What's that?
If it's a special permit requirement, then any building that's popular can get a special permit. Non-popular buildings.
I commend what you're doing here. I think it's a great idea to change it. I think it's brilliant. I think it's smart. It's better for the zoning.
Yeah.
I would just change the heading of it to get rid of it saying FAR reduction for a bank and make it something else, because now it's going to be broader than a bank and it's going to be more than FAR.
Well, I'm going to flag this and I'll put it on my list of conversations.
Yeah.
It may just be FAR reduction for the title and then specify it for commercial building.
Or dimensional reduction, because it deals with more than FAR. Because it deals with minimum open area, front yard setbacks. And Mark, is commercial building, are you comfortable with that that term is?
I think in the use table, we could make a reference for, table sections, basically the commercial section of the use table. Let's see how that works. It's only in the business district. Okay. I think that was all here. Section 5 is, something we have to deal with. So it's always something I bring up at these issue spotting, because we changed the whole thing. Section 6, parking.
One quick question on section 5.1.
Yeah.
Just a thought. The eminent domain.
Oh, the last provision?
Yep, because I think
Yeah.
I've seen this in other, I think you've dealt with this before in other towns, in a positive way. So 5.1. So this would. 5.1 eminent domain.
It's 11.
There we go.
Yeah,
Just a thought, when a lot is changed by eminent domain, so that means if the town takes a piece of the lot,
right.
could we potentially add if it's changed by eminent domain or a grant to the town? So if somebody wants to convey a piece to the town,
Well,
is that,
but it would, how, the conveyance wouldn't be to a private lot.
well, even a portion of it, let's say the town says, hey, for a school, we want, 3,500 square feet of your lot. So we're not gonna take it by eminent domain, we're gonna do it by a friendly conveyance.
I see what you're saying.
So instead of just when a lot is changed by eminent domain or by,
A friendly taking.
friendly taking or conveyance.
Do conveyances have to be explicitly accepted?
They have to be accepted by town meeting. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they're in lieu of a formal taking.
I just
Okay,
want to make sure that someone can't do this, do a conveyance to get out of a dimensional,
No.
a dimensional issue.
No.
no. All right, so on parking, I think the only thing I really changed here was I think there is a special permit requirement that allows for variations on parking in the text. I usually add something at the very end, but I think I found it already in an existing bylaw. It might be this. Yeah, where the literal application proves to be infeasible in these districts, the board may reduce the requirements by issuance of a special permit. I usually put that at the end, but you already had it, so I just left it where it was. And I think, I like it as a very flexible tool that allows people to avoid making big parking lots where they're not needed. So I don't think much changed in 6. So 6.2 gets us into signs. This is
Chair, can I
probably,
just make one comment on parking?
yeah,
It's just helpful on, and just for the committee's consideration, Mark, on 6.1.17, common driveways.
yeah,
So common driveways are becoming, they're a good tool and they're efficient to protect, to have open space, and they're useful in certain situations. And I would ask the committee to consider if it would be appropriate to allow these by special permit. I don't think it's smart to just prohibit a common driveway. This was put in when they were always allowed, and then this was put in as part of the mixed use overlay district. That I don't know why it went in, but it really eliminated, it's very oddly written and it's very limiting. And to me, in certain situations, common driveways make sense. They preserve a lot of open space and have it, instead of having two neighboring lots have to have two separate driveways.
yeah, it reduces curb cuts too, so.
Just the thought. I mean, just if it could say even at the beginning, or just for something for you to consider to put it on the discussion of
Okay.
why they wouldn't be allowed by special permit by the zoning board.
I would agree that it makes sense to get input on that.
Okay, got it. So signs continue to amaze me. Why the more detailed of your sign provisions is the one for the signage overlay district. I mean, it literally still goes 15 pages.
So a quick little bit of information on this. I've had discussions with various people. There was a signage committee that came up with a lot of the various requirements. That committee is now defunct. And the intent of it was to make sure that the downtown areas in particular, and which is Main Street, Albion Street, a few different streets, major streets that have significant businesses, would have a stricter set of signage requirements than the rest of the town for commercial establishments.
Right.
So that was the original intent. I think that it went overboard in its implementation. And if there's a way to simplify it greatly, that would be to everyone's benefit, because there have been advances in eliminating the redundancy of signage, and there is a enhancement of the overall signage that's being used. It creates a very significant burden on anyone who has property in that area and businesses who want to open in that area.
So your basic approach then would not be to strengthen the sign bylaw outside the district, but to weaken the bylaw, not the right word, but to lower the standards in the signage overlay district. Is there one size fits all that would be okay for the whole town? I mean, the signage overlay district, when I got the map and looked at it, it's pretty tiny.
It is. And I'm curious for other people who are familiar with this issue, and for those who this is new, if there's a way to handle it without really undoing the intent of the overlay, which really was to, in my understanding, it was to have an area of the town feel more historic, feel more uniform with some of the signs, so that we wouldn't have a odd combination of signs that would come across appearing to be garish. So others thoughts on that?
I mean, that's exactly what it was. It was getting rid of the honky tonk signs. So we didn't want any signs. I was on the board when this was heavily discussed. They didn't want signs that lit up. We wanted to look more like Melrose. We wanted to look a little fancier and have all our signs look the same. So that's why you see such a detailed bylaw. And Dan's right, though, the committee is no longer active. I think there will be pushback if we weaken this, because what they really don't want to see, they want signs to look nice. They don't all have to look the same, but they don't want someone to be able to come in. This is town council that just has something, garish is a good way to describe it.
Could I add some information, Mr. Chair?
Any other thoughts?
Could I add some information, Mr. Chair?
Sure.
Yeah, everything that Ann just described is 100% right. The way that overlay bylaw works is the only thing you can do by right is a 15 square foot sign, Mark. And what it basically said was that any change to an existing sign, you couldn't do. So it was a way of kind of getting rid of the grandfathering of these ugly box signs downtown that were internally lit, that new tenants would go in and just change the face of the sign.
Yeah.
Keep the same sign box up. So it was a way but what they said was, what the bylaw says, if you want to just do a 15 square foot sign, you can do it by right, but nobody can do that because it looks like a postage stamp on your building. Yeah. So it was a way to get people to go through a design review board process. And if you wanted to go outside what you could do under the bylaw, you needed a special permit. The committee that's now defunct is, the way the bylaw works is, if you don't comply, you need a special permit from the Board of Appeals. But before you can go to the Board of Appeals, you have to go before the design review board for recommendation. But we don't have a design review board anymore, it's defunct. So the bylaw doesn't work because you can't comply with it, because you're going for a special permit, but you technically don't have a recommendation from the design review board because they don't exist anymore.
And you're talking about the sign overlay. district.
Overlay district, Mark,
Right.
yeah, yeah. And so, you know,
I
that's, it,
I
and it has
started to
worked.
take
The
the
sign, the
standard
bylaw
from-
has worked. It's worked because, you know, over time, you've seen more tasteful signs go downtown. You know, it
Yeah, it
started
looks
with
nice downtown.
Sabatino's and Sakura. And it just takes time for it to work because tenants don't change all the time. So
Yeah.
I think it's done a lot of good, but it just needs to be cleaned up a little bit and maybe, you know, maybe get rid of the design review board process, Mr. Chair. Just eliminate that and say it just becomes a special permit at the zoning board, so to clean that up.
Yeah, all right, so I'm not a big fan of design review boards. But the thing that was most frustrating was to take the two bylaws and put them side by side. And then, I mean, even the terminology is different.
Yeah, you can't do it. One was
You can't
written
do it.
30 years ago and one was written 5 years ago.
Yeah. So is the consensus that we should just put up with it?
If there isn't a way to reconcile it, I can't see reducing the requirements. The other option would be to broaden the use of the overlay, but that then bring pretty much every sign
Yeah,
to the zoning board of appeals, and that seems to be excessive as well.
yeah.
But it had to go there anyways, Mr. Chair, because anything over 15 square feet had to go to this, has to be a special permit at the zoning board. So there was a committee put together that's gone on and on and on that was gonna try to revise this to make it more user-friendly, and I think that committee is just never, it never went anywhere.
No,
Capellian?
you can't go anywhere. I spent a couple of hours trying to pick it apart and glue it back together, but it doesn't work.
I would at least consider getting rid of the design review board requirement because we don't have one.
Well, that's gonna be back in the, I think that's this is the sign bylaw.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you're right.
Right,
Yeah.
that's back in the signage overlay district. All right, so these are the performance standards that we talked about a
Well,
couple of
Mark,
meetings ago.
Mark, I'm sorry to interrupt, but just to correct one thing if you could go back, I wanted to point this out to you, the 6.2.20 on the sign that you might want to make a change. So we used to, in order to get relief a little bit lower, under 1 where you are right there, the board used to be able to give relief on this by a variance, and that's what 1 is.
Yeah.
6 point, right? The Board of Appeals by vote of 4 members, I think it says may vary, may vary.
Yeah.
And then you're proposing to, I think, get rid of that and allow it by special permit, which I think is really smart, but I think
Yeah.
we delete number 1, otherwise they conflict.
I get it. Good point.
Thank you.
Oh, that's an underline. All right, I left the performance standards in that we talked about. I took notes. I deleted a few of these things and used the chairman's sushi menu votes to, do what I could do here. We'll obviously bring it to their attention. The next one is adult, and under adult, I've modernized your bylaw so you all don't go to constitutional jail. You have to say what 742 says, that you're not really regulating the speech, you're regulating secondary effects like crime to person, crime to property. That's the way you regulate adult businesses. And then these are things that you had already, 1,000 feet of this, 1,000 feet of that. I'm just referring to these things as adult uses, but they include clubs, bookstores, theaters, paraphernalia, and video stores. So the regulations are all the same for these businesses. And then there, by statute, are some mandatory conditions that you have to impose in a special permit, a couple of statutes that you can't be accused of violating, or you can't do this. And so I've just included those mandatory provisions as well. I know you're all looking forward to my explanation of this on the floor of town meeting, so. Now, if I understand correctly, what you did at town meeting, the RMD stuff is medical. And wasn't there some sort of movement to adopt adult use?
There was there were two articles to do that. They both failed.
So does that mean that this comes out?
I think that we will want to get the opinion of the health department on it, and it would not surprise me if they request that it get removed.
So I'm not sure if I totally agree, Dan. I think health department will be consulted on this. This may come before us again.
I'm in agreement, and I think that we'll want to get their opinion on it before we take any action.
And I think it might go to town meeting again. So I don't know that we should remove it.
Yeah, I think we should until it's kind of like the self-storage overlay district. When it goes through, I'll put it in.
Yeah.
All right.
Is there a way does it state in here where the adult use marijuana would be? Because I would think that should be basically in the same districts as adult uses.
Not surprisingly, it usually is.
But where it's currently being proposed is not.
Okay. Well, adult entertainment is allowed only in the LI and the I. And yeah, I mean, right now, the marijuana establishment for adult purposes is not allowed anywhere in the use table that I got offline.
Right. The current one doesn't allow for. I'm not opposed to adding it in, and so that there is a proposal here, and I am very interested in the feedback from the Board of Health and the health department on this. This would give them time to propose different changes so that this could allow for the use in certain specific locations, so that it's effectively boxed into areas that the town has said, okay, you allow those for adult uses. This is another form of adult use. And so it would substantially be in a similar area, so that it's not saying, oh, we don't allow anything. The fact that people who want to do it have, already own other property, that's neither here nor there, in my opinion, to our role as a review board.
Where did I get this bylaw from? Did this get sent to me when the warrant was being prepared for the town meeting that just happened? Okay.
Yes. Yeah. I sent you a copy of what was submitted. There were some elements of it that were very helpful, just in the sense that it had things that the CCC now requires.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
Well,
Dan, real quick, I have a question on this one. If it was voted down, shouldn't we just say it's not allowed as of right now?
Yeah, and that's what the use table says currently. It's no's all the way across the board. Nothing,
So
and there's nothing wrong with that. But I don't think it should be in here until the text is adopted in some form. A lot like the self-storage overlay district. We're just waiting for the AG to weigh in. This moratorium, you're only allowed to do this for a couple of years, and you're well past that. So this comes out. And then trailers, we just tweaked that a little bit. Are accessory apartments something that we should cover in the hot button issues?
I haven't found there to be much discussion of it outside of this committee.
Okay.
There was a little bit of discussion about it with relation to the MBTA, but because it's obviously tied into the MBTA issue, but that was really about general density in specific areas and more about the process of which the MBTA component was required as opposed to the details of, okay, if someone wants an accessory apartment, can they have it?
Yeah.
Well, Mark, I don't know if you heard about this, but I got an email today saying that Massachusetts is trying to have this be allowed by right. Have you heard about that?
It is.
They're trying to vote on that.
In the governor's housing bill from 2.5 years ago, accessory dwelling units of a certain size that meet the governor's definition are allowed as of right, by municipal option in the principal dwelling unit or dwelling building, and by special permit in accessory detached structures.
So
But
is
you've got
this
to adopt the governor's definition of accessory dwelling unit in order to be eligible to do that.
is this going to be like the MBTA thing? We're going to have to vote on it again to accept it.
You don't match the governor's definition. So if you wanted to change it, for example, the governor doesn't care if the person that occupies the unit is a family member. I'm trying to remember whether yours does or doesn't.
It
At the
does.
moment, it does, and that's something
does,
that
yeah.
we've discussed makes a lot of sense to remove that requirement.
Yeah, the governor definitely wanted to, this is Baker, definitely wanted to see these things created, notwithstanding the fact that a stranger would live in it. And then I think the size limit was 800 square feet or 50% of the principal dwelling unit, whichever was smaller.
For us, it was a minimum of 300 square feet, but not more than 25%.
Yeah.
It had to be 300 but not more than 25%.
If you look in the governor's, the governor's stuff is now codified in chapter 48. So if you look in section 1A of chapter 40A, there's some definitions for accessory dwelling unit. And the rules are spelled out, I think, in section 9 for accessory dwelling. Why don't we do this? Well, I don't know if I want to raise this. Why don't I hand out the governor's ADU stuff and we'll just let people read it. And if they want to press that button, they can come back to us and tell us they want to go with the governor.
Yeah, and
once they find out there's no limitation just to family members, they're not going to want to do that anyway. So
yeah, and Mark, I think Joe's comment, I think the House budget that was released today has additional potential changes to ADA rules. So over the next couple months, potentially there could be even more changes coming that could potentially allow it by right or some other changes that may come down the pipeline as well.
Okay, I heard that there's some movement afoot still on that site plan review bill that was proposed in the next week or so. It may come out of committee. I don't agree with it, but whatever. All right, so I didn't change anything in the art craft. These conversion rules didn't change. Senior housing, I've already made a note to go through there.
Mark, one point on this senior housing.
Yeah.
Under 8.4.3, applicability up a little bit. The zoning board is a special permit granting authority on this.
Is that the way we want to keep it?
That's the way it is in the table, and that's the way it is with assisted living facilities.
Okay.
It's up to
Are we
you.
okay with that?
It'd be a pretty big change to change that.
All right, no problem. We'll do
And
it.
then my only thing is, if you scroll down on the dimensional standards,
Yeah.
since some of these are going to be probably in the business district where it says building height, any addition or new construction shall not exceed 35 feet. Shouldn't it be like the other dimensionals are, say, the height required in the district?
That's fine. This is stuff you got already. I don't know that you're making any use out of this, but it looks good on paper.
Yeah, I don't think we have anyone who's using the OSD that I'm aware of.
And then this is gone. I don't understand number one. Why would that be in there? I mean, when you apply for a 40B, you need a project eligibility letter. But why would you need a preliminary site approval letter indicating potential support if this is being done outside of 40B? So typically these units that are covered and created by this are called LIP units only. And, you know, in a building maybe of, let's just say hypothetically, you had a building with 36 units and 9 created by special permit, you had 9 that are affordable. They're not 40B. So there's no subsidy in the sense of 40B. Instead, each of the 9 units can become countable for the SHI, but they are done so under paperwork called LIP unit only. I don't know what this was drafted for, but it doesn't make any sense to involve the Housing Appeals Committee here. They've only got one job, and that's 40B.
If it doesn't make sense to have it in there, I'd say less is more.
Yeah, I'm gonna take it out. I'll renumber this accordingly. The rest of this is all just basic, you know, affordable housing law. Okay, floodplain. I think you gave me a new one, didn't you?
We haven't sent any. We haven't had any changes to this.
Okay, then this is the municipal district. I think I found this somewhere. It is an odd district, so I moved it back to the odd district location. MBROD, no changes. Signage overlay. Get ready to buckle up for 15 pages of button pushing here. Mixed use.
There are some weird things in there that I noted, especially as it relates to like political signs and so forth.
Yes. You want me to let me crash down on those. In a case called, where is it?
It's 9.4.13 temporary signs towards the end, I think.
Okay.
That sounds right.
So in the marvelous case of Ladue versus Galeo, it's a St. Louis suburb. Mrs. Galeo, I can't remember if it was Mrs. Ladue or Mrs. Galeo. I think Ladue is the name of the suburb. Had a sign outside her house called "No to the Gulf." The sign said "No to the Gulf War," and it was the first Gulf War, George Sr.'s Gulf War. And kids tore it down. She moved it inside her fence. Kids tore it down. She put it on her porch. Kids tore it down. She moved it to her bedroom window. And, the building officials came and told her she had to take it down. And it went all the way to the Supreme Court. Obviously, the ACLU got involved. Went all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ruled that her sign had the highest form of political speech, the most protected type of speech in our Constitution, and she was allowed to have that sign up for her life, 24/7, if that's what she wanted to do. You can regulate the size, but you can't and you can regulate the placement in the sense that you can bar people from putting on public property. So it has to be on private property, but it can stay up as long as you want it to stay up, and you can have as many political viewpoints as you want. There you go. Anybody want to read Ledoux versus Galeo? I'll send you a copy. Interesting reading.
So would a flag be defined as a political sign? Okay, that's getting different pieces of present politics in.
No, I don't think it would be. And there are laws about how to fly the American flag, and I know that it's bad form to fly it upside down because I read that in the newspaper. Even if you can blame it on your wife.
I don't blame things on my wife.
Well,
I'm too smart, and she's standing behind me.
You're more of a man than apparently the guy who did blame it on his wife. So that's that. That's the sign stuff. And then I don't think we've got much else here that would be new and noteworthy once we get into the overlay districts beyond this. So that would be, what is this section? Wireless. And the one I really like is the creative development overlay district. I think that's a good tool that you've added to the box here. So this is what's happening on 128 in a number of different locations, and they're close to you, Burlington, Lexington. It's called, invent your own district. See if you can sell it on town meeting floor. And I don't worry anymore about spot zoning. I think it's watered down at this point so that it's not a concern. And then in section 10, there isn't that much that's changed here. In the enforcement violations section, moved a lot of stuff to rules and regulations. The two major
10.4, if I guess 10.4, Mark.
10.4
on the powers, one of the things for discussion might be the use variance. You had flagged it.
Yeah,
right
I still can't figure out what your bylaw says today.
You don't know. Yeah, you don't know if we allow them or we don't, right?
No, I don't.
Yeah, but yeah, but I think this is something that was a point of discussion for the committee and potentially the stakeholders, Mr. Chair.
Oh, God, yeah. That'll take us an hour.
Can you explain what the significance of this is?
Sure. Section 10 of the statute says that municipalities may offer the option of a use variance, but you have to expressly provide for it. So the basic rule is that you cannot give somebody a use variance unless the bylaw authorizes you to do so. And I'm distinguishing a use variance from a dimensional variance, which would just reduce the side yard or something like that. Cities who don't have to do this and show it to the Attorney General at least, use variances as a convenient way to avoid rezoning amendment packages, because it's just a one-stop shopping for a good applicant who's got a great idea to get the use variance. And then, of course, you've got to pray that nobody files an appeal. And that's because since 1976, when this was added to the statute, there has not been a single case in which a use variance awarded by a local ZBA has been upheld on appeal. None, zero, 50 years. So I need a grocery store on this residential lot because of soil condition, shape, topography. That don't fly, right? That doesn't work. I mean, a classic example, well, that actually a sign wouldn't be a use variance. It would be a dimensional variance in most cases. But it does have a certain amount of appeal to just hurry up the process rather than waiting, especially in a town. Waiting for town meeting can be a year wait. But if you can get a use variance, I've done use variances in Dartmouth, for example, in their professional office district, which was drafted about 30 years ago. They had no idea how successful it would be. The only restaurant allowed in the district is a sit down. Well, nobody goes to a sit down restaurant for lunch in a packed business district. So my client wanted to put in a Dunkin' Donuts with a drive-through window. Not allowed, specifically not allowed. But we asked for a use variance, said it was a hardship because nobody could get lunch, and they gave him the use variance. A lot faster than having to go to town meeting and have the debate. So there's pros and cons.
That's helpful to explain the issue. And I agree with the idea, let's get feedback before making a decision as to, as to what makes sense on this.
The same client in the same district just last year came back to me. He had already gotten approval in the same commercial complex with the Dunkin' Donuts. He got approval for an office building. Well, who the hell's going to build an 18,000 square foot office building after COVID? So he came back to converted it into an apartment building, which is not allowed in the district, as a use variance, 64 units. They gave him that too. What's the hardship? I got the national and local vacancy rates for office space and put them on the desk. So there's a lot of hardship here. They said, we agree, have fun.
Towns around us have it.
Yep.
Like, I think Reading has it. I think you did Linfield, Mark. I think they allowed it. You did their bylaw.
The bigger the city or town, the more common they are. But, in many small towns, use variances are, they're very much disfavored and prohibited, and you couldn't even ask. Lawyers love them. I did Natick. It's a very popular tool in Natick. So it made the list. And then the only other two things I think should make the list would be these two things I put at the end for Dover amendment. Well, probably we should talk about the new special permit criteria and site plan review amendments, direct appeal to court. That's something everybody should know about. And then I'll just not going to spend a lot of time talking about the Dover amendment site plan review stuff and the reasonable accommodations under federal disability law, but people should know that they're there. So I'm going to make a cleaned up list, and I'll make it as a matrix. Major changes in caps, minor changes not, and a third column that just explains quickly the nature of the change. so that people can find this stuff later when they go home.
Sounds good. And anything you can send, preferably if it's a Thursday meeting, if we can get it by the Friday before or so we can get posted either Friday or Monday morning, that'll be helpful, just so that people have a few days, have the opportunity to have a few days with the document.
Will do.
Anyone have any other questions or feedback at this point?
I got a couple issues on the special permit, but they can wait, just kind of. Not issues, but things to point out. I can do it now, or it can happen in a later meeting.
Send me an email, Brian.
Yeah, I'll do that. Efficiency, yep. And I'll copy you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, appreciate it. So we've got the meeting on June 27th. We will hopefully all be at. Again, that will be a hybrid meeting. The most likely in the public safety building. I will, as soon as I have confirmation on the location, I will send that. Anyone is welcome to go in person, and if you prefer to be online, that's also acceptable by all means. So we also have there's several holidays and observances coming up. You'll note that I'm not putting on any meetings over for July and August as of now. I will email out requests for that shortly, and if people have preferences, as people are learning and figuring out their summer schedules, we'll see if it makes sense to have a meeting in July or August. Otherwise, it may be a time to just kind of coalesce the feedback that we get from this meeting as well. So there may be a meeting in July and or August. Otherwise, we'll plan on meeting in early to mid-September. The first Monday in September is obviously Labor Day. That would be September 2nd. The third would be September 16th. So we will meet by September 16th, possibly earlier. We may want to meet the week before Labor Day or something along those lines. We'll see. It depends upon what we have for availability. So there are a variety of things going on, but again, I'll email that and we can have that administrative determination can be done by email. That's permitted.
Mr.
Okay.
Chairman, when you circulate a draft for folks for the 27th, I made changes to the document I shared screen with tonight, so I'm going to resend that to you. Use that when it's dated today.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay.
Appreciate that. And I will, anything that's going to be distributed, I will realistically post to the website as well, just so that members of the public who are following along have the ability to do so.
Great.
So a couple of holidays and observances people may or may not be aware of. We've got D-Day, which is coming up on the 6th as remembrances. We've got Shavuot, which is a Jewish holiday often commemorated with cheesecake and dairy. Starts in the evening of June 11th. Very tasty holiday. From a cultural perspective, Flag Day, June 14th. This received a lot of discussion at town meeting. This whole month is Pride Month, for those who may not be aware of. I do actually have the Pride flag, the classic Pride flag behind me in honor of Pride Month as well. So Father's Day is June 16th for those who are fathers, and for those who are directly related to fathers, happy Father's Day to everyone in advance. Last month it was Mother's Day, obviously, and it's one of those things that, being a father myself, it's a lot of work. Eid al-Adha starts on June 16th. It's technically a tentative date. It's based upon when certain stars are seen in the evening, but it is expected to be in June 16th. Bunker Hill Day is June 17th. That isn't a observed holiday per se, but it is one to acknowledge the taking of Bunker Hill. June 19th is a federal holiday that did start a few years ago on June 19th itself, for Juneteenth, and that was commemorating when the slavery was actually ended in the United States, and people in Texas were finally notified of the end of the Civil War. American Eagle Day is June 20th. Very important. There will be some issues coming up later this year that relate to and rodenticides, things along those lines. So, and you may have seen the American eagles. We've got bald eagles that go around the lake and live in and fly around the lake a lot. So on June 20th, pay attention to them. Summer solstice is also that same evening, in which case it's truly the sunniest day of the year. I'd say the longest day of the year, but the longest day of the year is actually in the fall. It's when the day that we send the clocks back. So those are some upcoming dates. Anything else before we adjourn?
Happy 4th of July, everybody. See you soon. Oh, that's coming after the meeting. I forgot.
That'll be after the meeting.
Yeah.
We will see you before the fireworks, although we will hear fireworks. At least anyone on the west side will hear fireworks well before then, because they tend to go off almost every night as people are firing off fireworks for some reason or other. Having lived here for 25 years, I've never figured out quite why. It happens almost every night in the summer, but it does. With that, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
And makes the motion. Lucy very quickly seconds the motion, getting ready to adjourn. Any discussion? With that, we will take a vote in the order in which you appear on my screen. The order has changed a little bit. So Anne,
Yes.
you're first. Joe,
Yes.
Catherine,
Yes.
Kevin,
Yes.
Lucy,
Yes.
Tim,
Yes.
and I'm in an affirmative. And maybe it's worth noting, Tim, just in the notes, that Eric had left at approximately 8:59, probably because the library was closing, just as from a requirement. So with that, we have unanimous vote for adjournment. Thank you, Tim, for taking notes. Much appreciated. Feel free to post them to the Dropbox once you have them ready. And we will see everyone in a couple weeks on June 27th. Please enjoy the summer weeks as we are getting to longer days, warmer nights, and hopefully less mosquitoes. So thank you very much, everyone. Have a good night.
Good night.
Thanks.